What should you feel about the Qatar World Cup? Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. My name is Priyanka Sharma. The FIFA World Cup kicks off on the 20th of November. For the first time ever, the mega sporting event is being hosted by an Arab country. Qatar is the chosen one. This is where it is located on the map. Qatar is a constitutional monarchy. It is home to around 2.6 million people, 85% of whom are foreign workers, and only 15% are citizens. 99% of Qataris live in cities. Qatar's official religion is Islam. The country has the world's fourth highest GDP in the world. Now, not everyone was happy when Qatar won the bid to host the World Cup. The announcement was made in 2010. Soon, questions followed, including questions of possible kickbacks. In 2014, an investigation was opened. The idea was to probe whether Qatar bribed FIFA officials to win the bid. The investigation indicted several senior FIFA officials. This is Sepp Blatter. He used to be the president of FIFA. He had overseen the bidding for the 2022 World Cup. Blatter has now been banned from football for life. He says choosing Qatar as the host was a mistake. But who chose Qatar? Blatter says Qatar was chosen as a result of secret political pressure. What kind of pressure? Let's take a moment to look at the bidding process. It begins with FIFA inviting countries to bid to host the World Cup. Usually this takes place 7 years before the competition. But this is not set in stone. A window of 3 to 4 weeks is then given to complete the application. FIFA has a few requirements that the bidders must meet. For example, the country must also be willing to put in a certain amount of investment, have or build a certain number and kind of stadia. FIFA then evaluates each bid. The process involves touring each country. Then comes the big vote. It is an electronic vote. Earlier, only the executive committee would cast their mandate, but now it's been open to all member associations. To win, a bidder must get a majority of the votes. Sepp Blatter says that the 2022 World Cup was handed to Qatar because there was pressure from France's then president, Nicolas Sarkozy. But what Sarkozy got to gain here? Here's what the former president of UEFA, Michel Platini, told The Guardian back in 2013. I'm quoting, "I knew Sarkozy wanted the people from Qatar to buy PSG. I understood that Sarkozy supported the candidature of Qatar." Now, Blatter says, Platini told me he had been invited to the Elysee Palace, where French President Sarkozy had just had lunch with the Crown Prince of Qatar. Sarkozy said to Platini, "See what you and your colleagues from UEFA can do for Qatar when the World Cup is awarded." There are some who believe that Qatar being chosen to host the World Cup is downright absurd. Why? Because the World Cup usually kicks off in June, but Qatar in June is scorching. Temperatures reach 43 degrees Celsius. In other words, it's not ideal match temperature. So FIFA had to move the tournament. It is now being held in November and December. This has not been easy on the football calendar. Domestic leagues have had to be moved so that Qatar can host the World Cup. People also point at Qatar's football history, and there's none. Historically, Qatar has never been a football country, and so it's not surprising that Qatar did not even have football infrastructure. The country has now spent $220 billion to build stadia, hotels and other facilities. Just think about that, $220 billion. Now, just for comparison, South Africa spent $3.5 billion to prepare itself for the 2010 World Cup. One can't help but ask, why did Qatar need to host the games? What was the compulsion? What does Qatar have to gain from the World Cup? Quite a lot, actually. There's profit, and then there is PR. Let's talk money first. The 2018 World Cup was held in Russia. It raked in $5.36 billion in revenues. Also, $3.5 billion in profits. While FIFA pocketed most of it, the revenue coming into the host country through spendings at hotels, restaurants, and sports tourism is undeniable. But this isn't all that's tempting for Qatar, and I will tell you why. Estimates say that the 2022 World Cup will add $17 billion to the Qatari revenue. But the country has already spent way more than that sum. $220 billion, like I mentioned, according to one estimate. Bloomberg pegs the number at $300 billion. Qatar has built 7 new stadia, a new metro system linking these stadia, 100 new hotels, a new airport, hospitality centers, shopping centers, and many other facilities. $300 billion. Can Qatar even afford to spend that much? Of course it can. Qatar is a high-income country. It has the world's third largest natural gas reserves, also the world's third largest oil reserves. Qatar is among the world's largest exporters of liquefied natural gas. So it is not just profits that Qatar is betting on. It's the PR. Did you know the World Cup is the world's most watched sporting event? 3.6 billion people watch the World Cup in Russia. 3.6 billion. Imagine that. Now, critics say that Qatar wants to use this viewership, this PR, to sports wash. Let me explain. Sports washing is when individuals, groups or countries use sports to improve their reputation. To put it simply, when a country uses sports as a propaganda, it is called sports washing. Saudi Arabia has been accused of sports washing by hosting the Grand Prix. China has been accused of sports washing, by hosting the Beijing Winter Olympics. Coming back to my original question, why does Qatar need the FIFA World Cup 2022? Well, it hopes the Games will modernize the country's image, make it a business destination, bring it at par with the likes of Dubai. But ever since the announcement of the 2022 World Cup venue, Qatar has been swamped in controversies. First, there are allegations of labor abuse. In 2016, Amnesty International claimed that migrant workers who flew down to Qatar to build the World Cup infrastructure are being kept in filthy conditions. Their salaries are being withheld, and they are being forced to pay recruitment fees. Qatar responded to this report by passing a law in 2017. It cut back the working hours for migrant workers, improved their living conditions, and protected them from working in scorching heat. In 2021, the Human Rights Watch said nothing has changed. That migrant workers are still having their wages withheld. They are still working long hours and under oppressive conditions. In 2021, a report said 6,500 workers had died in Qatar since it had won its World Cup bid. Qatar said the number is misleading. Labor abuse is one issue, the criminalization of homosexuality another. Same-sex relations are illegal in Qatar. Punishments include fines, prison sentences, even death by stoning. But what happens to the LGBTQ+ fans flying down to Qatar for the matches? Well, World Cup organizers say everyone is welcome. But Qatar 2022's chief executive, Nasser Al Khater, insists that fans will have to quote-unquote respect our culture. Also, Qatar will not change its laws on homosexuality. Earlier this week, a Qatar World Cup ambassador called homosexuality a damage in the mind. Now, should all of this affect you? Just FYI, Russia too does not recognize same-sex unions. Russia too has a history of human rights violations. But the World Cup Russia hosted was regarded as one of the best in history. So what should you feel about Qatar 2022? For years now, athletes have made political statements during games and matches. Some of you may remember that following the death of George Floyd in America, NBA players took the knee to protest racial injustice. You see, it's wrong to say that moral accountability ends with sports, because it does not. And star players know this. In fact, captains of Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany have already planned to wear rainbow armbands in Qatar in support of inclusivity. What about you, the fans? Should you boycott Qatar 2022, or embrace it, or be indifferent to it? The Football World Cup happens once in 4 years. It will be a sporting spectacle. There will be some great games, great football. So it will be a pity to block it from your TV. But will you be able to watch the matches without thinking about the human rights abuses in Qatar? The mature thing to do would be to separate your feelings about Qatar from your love for football. That said, we believe to each his own. You and you alone should decide how you should feel about the Qatar World Cup.